Hi, I'm Amelia.
And I'm Yvonne. Together, we wrote a book on female friendships, and boy, do we have questions.
We're here to continue the conversation and help women to navigate, cultivate, and celebrate female friendships.
This is Girl Friendships. Reciprocity. Does 50-50 apply in friendships? In today's episode, we're going to explore how that works in female friendships when one person is doing most of the giving for a long, long time. How do you accept help versus how do you give help?
I just think some people are takers. They just here to take. That's my position.
And I mean, Adam Grant did write a book that I really loved called Give and Take. But before I get into that, I do think, we think of reciprocity as so important in our friendships. I think most of us do. We kind of want, okay, if we're giving to the friendship, we want the other person to give.
Because that's fair.
Yes. It's definitely fair. But at the same time, somebody might be in a certain season of their life or experience where they have less to give. Like maybe they have young kids that require a lot of their attention. Like one of my closest friends, she just gave birth to a baby girl last week. And and she's got a toddler at home. She's going to have a little bit less time and energy to call me. And I'm not going to be too upset by that.
Fine. I don't have a problem with that. But just back it up. I think, personally, that there should be an expectation in friendships of reciprocity. Whether it's 50-50 or not, but it should be close to 50-50. Because if I'm doing all the giving and you're doing all the taking, and this is a long-standing thing, I have an issue with that. And I'm going to call you out on it, my friend. Right? So, yes, I can give the person who's got the baby and in a new relationship and need time to dedicate to that, I can give that person a bye if that person has poured into me previous to that. Because then I know this is just circumstances that's making them not as accessible and available to me. And I have been in circumstances where I can't be as accessible to my friends. But it's acknowledging, I think even when you're out of the picture, you can at least send a note thinking about you. I'm sorry, I'm under the weather or whatever it is. But there should be some expectation of reciprocity. That's my position.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with you. I think it's only natural. I think it's a natural human driver to want that reciprocity and to want to give that reciprocity. So, but at the same time, I think sometimes we place too high of an expectation on that, almost like transactional, reciprocity. And I would say that that's less important to me than really the intention that people have when they're giving.
So that by transaction, you mean it sounds almost like when you say 50-50, like somebody is keeping a mental tally in their head. How much was it? Am I 49%? Am I 51%? Did you go back? Is that what it feels like to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it could be like, okay, well, I called my friend last time, so now I expect her to call me. And it's almost wanting it to be a moment by moment give and take versus like just an overall balance in the friendship.
So how do you know when it's tipping to the area where you're giving more?
Mm-hmm.
Or if I'm the one who is receiving more, do I even notice?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm a taker, I'm just going to take. You want to give? I love to take, right? So why would I want to give when you are willing? Why would I not want to take when you're willing to give to me all the time?
Yeah.
Isn't that human nature?
And I think maybe what would be helpful to this conversation is if we kind of talk about different aspects of giving and taking, right? Because we've all had conversations with people who only want to talk about themselves. And to be honest, sometimes I'm completely okay with that because I'm just in a listening mood. And I know my friend's going through a lot and I just want to hear her out. And I have absolutely no problem. I have no intention or desire to talk about what's going on with me because sometimes, I just want to be there for my friend and that's my intention. That being said, like there are people who, with every conversation and every time they interact with you, they only, and even when you're trying to, pull the conversation a little bit more toward what's going on with you, they just pull it back to whatever's going on with them. So I would say that, that's one example of an area where I think reciprocity is good, right? Where you're getting to know the other person and what's going on with them as much as they're doing that with you. And that doesn't have to be every conversation being like, oh, hey, how are you? Tell me about what's new with you. Okay, now how am I? I'm going to tell you about what's up with me. Like, not every conversation has to be like that, but an overall balance, I think, feels best for most people.
Okay.
So that's one example. I don't know, Yvonne, if you had any other examples that you were thinking of in terms of this give and take.
So I think I talk about it in the book. I'm not sure. I have one particular person, when this topic comes up, that experience comes to mind. Somebody lived together, we were roommates for a long time, and I thought we had a really solid friendship. So when I moved away, because sometimes moving does impact your friendship. I can't remember if it was me who moved away or the other person who moved away. So I would do my regular thing. I would call frequently, and I was the one always calling. And I mentioned to the person over the course of time, after a certain period of time, like, you notice I'm the one always calling in. Every time I'd call the person, they would say, oh, I was just thinking about you, yes, I definitely will call you. So I said, well, you call the next time. And the person would promise. And sure enough, they would not call. So I remember reaching a point where I said, this is my last call to you, because we weren't in a position where we could meet up. So if I don't hear from you, because what it feels like, I'm the only one investing in this friendship. So if I don't call, will the friendship fall apart? And 25 years later, I got an invitation to this person's anniversary. And that was when we connected. And it wasn't even her that initiated the conversation. It was her daughter. So I showed up because we had history together. But I was the only one maintaining that relationship. And it's okay. It's not like it was critically important to me, that friendship. But sometimes you have to know, I'm the one pouring into this. This other person is not. And just know when to say, is this adding to my quality of life? And if it isn't, then, I've got other people I can pour into, or who are pouring into me. Why don't I invest in those instead?
Yeah, I hear you on that. And I think a lot, and good for you, by the way, for saying that to your friend, because I think a lot of women, and even I think the survey suggests that a lot of women do this, where they don't necessarily discuss things that are going on. And so I think a lot of people would have just made that decision to stop calling their friend and see what happens, versus saying, this was my last call to you. Let's see what happens.
Oh, by the way, plug right now. Remind us, listeners, if you want to hear some of the feedback we got from the people who contribute to the friendship questionnaire, we can tell you, tell you the specific questions we asked them and what they had to say, because this is a good example. Most women do not deal with confrontation with their friends directly. Yeah. They prefer not to. So Remind us to talk about that in another episode. But back to reciprocity.
Yeah. But I definitely hear what you're saying in terms of, you felt like you were the only one maintaining the friendship. And I just find that interesting too, because there had to have been enough there for you to want to maintain it. So I find that really interesting. And if there's enough there for you to want to maintain it, is it just worth it sometimes being the one to pick up the phone? I don't know.
That's why you're the heart and I'm the head. Because at some point I'll give you enough and then I'm going, I'm making a decision. And it doesn't have to be that we're mad with one another. I was not mad. I just said, okay, count your losses, because we talk also in the book about people who are in our lives for a season. Mm-hmm. And it could be that my season with that person was finished. It's not like I was pining after her and my life took a downward turn as a result of I had other people and it was probably time to move. And yes, I would have allowed space for that person if they wanted to be in my life. But since they didn't, I had other people to pour into.
Yeah.
So maybe that was just a friend for a season. And we'll talk about that in another episode, because I think and the reason why I showed up for her anniversary, because I think it's important to mark the occasions of those people who are in our lives for a season. They poured into our lives in a significant way. And because they're not part of our lives currently, our tendency sometimes is to forget them. But let's show up for them. Let's even, if we're thinking about them, send them a note to acknowledge that, man, for this particular period in my life when I needed somebody, you were there. So I really believe in acknowledgement. So maybe the friendship is not meant to go on forever. But we can at least acknowledge the people who played a big part in our coming of age.
Yeah. And it's like, I think you put that really well. For me personally, I really have trouble with that. I kind of want to carry all of my friendships forward with me. And I have a really hard time saying, oh, this friendship was more just for a season. Like it hurts when it ends, and I kind of realize that I was there for a season in that person's life and I'm no longer needed or necessary or welcome. And, but I think it's great that you have that approach, because I think that's a saying for a reason, right? Because it is something that is common, and sometimes you do have certain people in your life for a season.
Yeah. And yes, if I'm still very emotionally invested in that person, it would hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It would hurt if that person has chosen to walk away from me. It's like a breakup, it's like, I'm still carrying feelings for you, and you found other people. So, similar to our romantic relationships, the friendships, because we pour into our friendships. I think women, we pour a lot into our female friendships. And that's why this book is even a topic, when you approach me with the subject. But there's so many layers to female friendships. There's so many things we don't address or we do address or whatever. It's a very interesting relationship. So, yeah, explore it with us as we go through these podcasts together. And please tell us how you're experiencing your own friendships, because as you can see, I have many questions.
I do have another question for you guys. We did discuss the different types of people in the reciprocity side of things. So there's givers and takers, or givers and receivers. But why are we attracted to certain types of people? Like, from what it sounds like, both of you guys are givers. But how do you know when to receive? How do you know when to accept the help for yourself?
Oh, I'm going to jump right into this one, because I am much more comfortable giving than receiving. Because maybe I'm going to own this one with my chest. Maybe I do this mental tally in my head and say, I've been giving it, but I want me to be erring on the side of giving more. So I have to wonder, the psychologist in me, does that give me an upper hand? Ooh, that's comfortable. I mean, is it a power dynamic that is it a control issue? Like when I'm the one giving more, go there, Yvonne, does it mean that I get to feel superior? And if that's the case, what does that say about me? Because I'm not as comfortable with receiving as I am with giving. And maybe, let me acknowledge that some part of that is socialization. Even the Bible says it's better to give than to receive. I think it says in the Bible. And we're taught from your kids, just, be givers. Don't be a moocher. So that's part of that in our socialization. So yeah, let me put that out there. So do you think because of the fact that I want to err more on the side of giving than receiving, and I'm uncomfortable receiving, does it mean that I have a superiority complex? Hell,
Maybe not. Maybe not. One of the things that I've realized about myself is I spent a good chunk of my life focused on what I could give to other people and centered my life around my relationships and my friendships and constantly gave more to them. And I think there were two components of that. One is I felt like if I invested and I gave into my friendships and my relationships, but honestly, mostly my friendships in my 20s, that it would secure and cement that sort of support when I needed it. And that's not a pretty thing to look at in the face.
like an investment, right?
But I think that's the realization that I had at some point, maybe after I turned 30, where I had subconsciously been giving so much to my friendships because I thought, yeah, like when I need this support, this person will be there because they'll remember all the times that I was there for them and all the times that I gave to them. So it was a little bit of a giving with an expectation that I could bank that and save that for a rainy day.
But I think that's human nature, whether or not it's true, though, because look how much I poured into you. Look how I was there for you when that happened. And I can't believe that you're not there for me now. So already in our heads, we're going to feel slighted when somebody doesn't give back what we poured into them. But then we have to look at our reasoning for doing that. Was I doing that really for the person or to store things in the bank, so to speak, so I could withdraw at a later date?
Yeah. And that was a tough realization for me. Number one, because I realized that some of the friendships and relationships that I had invested in so much, they weren't going to pay out what they needed. When
you went to withdraw, there would be no money in the bank.
Exactly. When I went to withdraw, there was no money in the bank. The check bounced. And so that was a really, really tough realization. But I think also what it taught me was two things. One is to pour more into myself and to not overgive, because it does place an expectation and sometimes an unfair, unspoken expectation on someone else that they need to return the favor. And now I want to come to my friendships with a more pure intention. Like I give when I want to give. And when I can pour into myself and my goals and my vision for the future, I have actually more to give my friends, not less to give my friends than, when I'm spending all my time focused on them. So coming at it from a more pure intention and not just, calling someone out of guilt or calling someone because you're also hoping they'll do that for you one day.
Yeah, but I think we still, much as we shouldn't do it for that reason, we still hope. Because that's what makes the friendship real. Like, I should expect you to pour into me, but it's also recognizing when you're doing all the pouring. You go to cash that check and it's bounced. And it didn't just bounce today. It bounced all the other times you've tried to cash it. And maybe then we need to ask ourselves, am I drawn to these kind of people that I tend to pour into and they can't give back? And what does that say about me?
Yeah, absolutely. And like speaking from my own experience, I definitely think that I was drawn to those kind of people, not just in friendships, but in romantic relationships. I was drawn to people who were more comfortable taking than giving, and still obviously gave me enough in, the friendship or the relationship for me to feel like I was getting what I needed. But now I think it's really so number one, yes, that was absolutely a dynamic that was repeating in my life that I've since halted. And now I feel like I'm drawn to my friendships and I invest in my friendships for the right reasons. And, I'm not attracted to those people that kind of want to keep me at arm's length and want to,
that have to work hard.
Yeah.
Right.
That I have to like work hard for their friendship or just make them the center in order for them to be happy. Like that was a realization that I had was, some people are just most comfortable, not just like, because it's not just about give and take. It's just, are my needs more important than yours, period? Am I the center of this friendship versus it? I don't know. Like I'm trying to think of a different shape.
Yeah.
But how do you guys communicate what you need from a friend for that reciprocity, for example? Like, I've been with my best friend since we've known each other before we lost teeth. And we've always just had that sort of friendship dynamic. Like, even when it was the four of us, if we were splitting food to get something to eat, if we had a burger, we'd split it 4 ways. And that was always just like how we were. We didn't think about it. And we're children, literally like 7, 8 years old, cutting a burger in half and then quarters, depending on who's sharing it, just because we want to make sure that everyone gets something. But as we got older, we just kept living like that. But I realized with other friendships, for example, that I had issues finding that balance, I guess, or communicating that, because if they didn't grow up with that sort of mentality, how do they become the person who is a giver versus a receiver?
And people won't always know what we want. So sometimes when you've got history with a group of people, you just have ways that you've always behaved to one another, and then you bring that expectation into other relationships. And you're kind of puzzled when the other person is like, how come they're not splitting their burger with me? That's not nice. And so we then have to say, splitting burgers is something I appreciate because it makes me feel like I'm an equal member of this. So if I can process that in my head, so when somebody else is just, eating the whole burger by themselves and they're looking at me going, oh, did you want some? Even if they ask, then it shows me that I need something more from this relationship. But maybe that person who doesn't split their burger gives me something else that these other friends don't give me. So again, it's cutting people some slack and just recognizing that we just treasure the people we have for what they can do for us. And maybe we're comfortable. We can ask for what we want and hope we get it from this new person or this new relationship. But there's no guarantee that even if you ask, you're going to get it, right? So if we go back to the reciprocity example, if I'm giving 80, 90, 100%, and the other person is just quite content to be receiving all the time, and I say, hey, I know I'm calling you all the time, or I notice that whenever we go for dinner, I'm always paying or whatever. I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable having that conversation. And the person, even after you raise it, still does not change the behavior. Then I'm going, girlfriend, I think I'm going to gradually reduce contact with you because you're just not what I need right now. But it takes a certain level of maturity for us to be able to do that, because some of us, we have to recognize the neediness in ourselves, and we bring that to our relationships, right?
And I would love to add to that by getting a little bit more specific about how you can kind of broach this topic. Because I think the tendency sometimes for people is to, or at least it was to me, like my tendency in the past was to just keep feeling resentful and not say anything until finally I was so mad that I had to say something, right? And so I super do not condone that approach. It's not effective. It can be very hurtful to the other person that, it comes out of nowhere for you. Yeah. But it comes out of nowhere for them because, here you were acting like everything was good for so long. So my advice to you is, if you are going to broach this kind of topic, really think about a specific recent example and kind of start from there, because what you don't want to do is go into the conversation saying you always do this or you always do that or you never do that.
Even if it's true.
Even if it's true. And even if that's how you feel, when you bring it up that way, that person's going to be defensive. That's just natural because, they're going to look for some example.
You pointing the finger, we automatically go into defensive mode.
Yeah.
When we're being accused like that or accosted like that.
Absolutely. And also it just makes our brains work on trying to find examples where that wasn't true, right? And that's not what you're trying to get across. It's not about like, did it happen that time, or is it always happening? It's to find a specific recent example is a good way to go, because then it's just sharing how that made you feel and what you would prefer the next time, and then bringing that conversation up from like, you can see how that person reacts, right? Like if you are specific and you're kind and you're not disparaging of them, and they still, they're not open-minded to learn more about what you meant or how you feel about it, then that's a sign that that's, probably not a friend that's going to help, like, be open to what you need in the friendship. Whereas if you bring them an example like that and you address it, and they are really open-minded and they're like, oh my gosh, hey, I had no idea you felt that way, like, let me try to work on that, and then see if that person's capable.
Give them the benefit of the doubt. That's basically what you're saying. Talk it through, and then see where that takes you. And maybe we'll talk about at some point, like, what if you have the conversation and the person's like, how could you feel that way about me? I do this and this and this. And they even when you try not to come across as accusatory, but they take it that way. So suddenly you now have a conflict on your hand when you were trying to just work through identifying your needs. Sometimes people go there, right? And yeah, we can deal with that in a whole other episode, dealing with the conflict, or sometimes when you're trying to have hard conversations with your girlfriends, because, sometimes you have to go there with your girlfriends. But you see, the thing with girl friendships, and maybe we need to talk about this here, is that nowhere when you and I got together, we agreed to work on a book together, but nowhere did we sign this contract that says, we are going to be steadfast. We're going to be, steadfast is the word used. We're going to be reciprocal. We're going to be kind. Like, we didn't sign any contract. So now when you're behaving badly, or I am behaving badly, we don't feel like we have a leg to stand on, so to speak, or anything to go back to say, well, you signed here that you would be faithful and true and kind and whatever. So then we tend to not know how to have these conversations with people. When I got married, I stood before witnesses and I signed a contract to say, we're going to be faithful to one another. We made a public commitment. Female friendships, for the most part, they're private assumptions. Are they? Are they private assumptions about each other? They're not public commitments. And I don't know that many of us, and y'all could jump in and tell me, ever said to your friends, oh, now that we're friends, these are the expectations?
No, so definitely not ever going in and saying, oh, these are the expectations, like, unless you're troubleshooting already because there is an expectation that's not being met. But definitely you don't, like, when I think about the origin of some of my closest friendships, we met in grade 9 and it was more like a very casual chat, more so than like, hey, do you want to be my friend forever? And make sure that you call me. And even if you move to another city, we're going to still spend X amount of time together. And even if you're in a relationship, you still have to text me. All of those kinds of things, right? Of course, like, there was no agreement made like that. So you just kind of have to navigate it as you go.
And because we don't have the expectations spelt out, articulated, vocalized, then we don't have anything to fall on when people behave badly. We don't know how to call them out. We don't know what to hold them to. That's why I think we should have expectations that we, as adults, as people going into intentional friendships, we should have expectations in our head that this is what I expect from people in my life that constitutes good behavior. And when they go out of that, then I'm going to call you on it.
Maybe like a welcome package when you're exchanging phone numbers. Welcome to my life. Here are the rules.
Using this word friends, I have a few rules about this.
So friendship admissions package. Well, like, kind of like how I was thinking about it as you guys are speaking about communicating and how that works is like almost how you'd communicate a boundary in a romantic relationship, for example. Like, I know with some of my friends, for example, I have certain lines you can't cross. Like, if somebody does something to me that I feel is egregious, we're just going to end the friendship right there.
Egregious. I love that word. Ooh, same.
But if somebody does something that's like, I don't really like this, but I still like you, so I'm going to tell you about it. For example, like, I don't like people stealing the first bite of my food. That could be something that a friend could do. I like
It's a friendship breaker, stealing the first bite
No,
of your food.
it's not a friendship breaker, but it's a boundary. I want to eat the first bite of something I paid for.
That's so. That's so
I want to eat all the bites.
I don't mind sharing.
Come on, Daddy.
I don't mind.
Anybody can share my plate.
And people can take from my plate. They could eat my fries, but if I buy a burger and fries, let me at least eat the first bite. Like, let me get some.
No, that is a no for me. That is a no for me.
See the friendship contract now.
So there's with my friend, for example, if they took a bite of my food right away, I'd be like, I don't like that. You're not. But it's gonna be a conversation, because then at least I've addressed it already, and I've said to them, like, hey, this is something that you're doing that I don't like. Can you please stop? Then they say, yes, I'll stop, or I'll make sure this doesn't happen again, because if they value me as a friend, they will not do things that I don't like.
I'm sorry, I'm still back here with the person about it. No, but it's helping us recognize the quirkiness of our personalities. I mean, because somebody else will look at that and I'm judging you. I'm sorry, I'm judging you based on the first bite of food because it's just food. But that's important, right? And I could sit here and judge you, but I could say, but that's important to her. I don't have to even understand or agree or whatever why it's important. But if I respect, yeah.
Because a boundary is about things that you're willing to accept in a relationship, and the people in your life are willing to accept that as well. But they don't have to do anything that they don't want to do. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. And if you communicate those ahead of time, usually your friendships are able to get stronger because you both know. And it doesn't mean that you are controlling them or controlling their behavior, because it's all about choices, really. You could make a choice to continually eat someone's first bite of their food.
It's all about choices.
But you could also make a decision to be like, hey, this person doesn't like when I do this. And what is the consequence of the action if I decide to take that action again?
Gotcha.
So that's more so where I feel like it could help, especially with the reciprocity. Like, you don't have to be a transactional person like, well, I gave you $50, I'm going to need $50 back 3 years from the date and all that stuff. But you know that there are certain things that are like little things that just are annoying that you can communicate. And then there's big things where you probably like will talk about in another episode, bigger things you need to have more stricter conversations on.
But something you're saying just underlie the fact that I need to respect myself or value myself. Because if I don't value myself, then I don't feel comfortable putting expectations of how you should treat me, because I don't value myself, right? So it's basically to say to everybody who's listening, like, you are important, you matter, and how you feel and what you desire, and, you as a person matter, and people who come into your life should pour into it and not let you feel like less than, because if that's how you're feeling in all your relationships, then that's a problem.
And so it's interesting. I 100% agree that, you need to value yourself to be able to ask for those things that you want from other people. But what's really interesting to me is, like, I really struggle to voice things that should, in my opinion, go without saying. Like, I struggle so damn hard.
Yes.
So, like, if someone took a bite of my food, like, I wouldn't know what to say. It would be completely stuck in my throat, because that's just something in my eyes that people don't do. And so I don't even know how to address it if somebody goes kind of outside of like my worldview expectations.
Mm-hmm. I just go, I would say, did you just take my food? You're not doing that again, but I have learned to just be a little bit more outspoken. And sometimes I find when I catch it in the moment, and if I'm able to articulate it right then, it's easier than me going home and what's the word we use in the book? Ruminate, because women like to ruminate.
Ruminate. I believe that's my middle name.
Amelia Ruminate. No, we would have a movie called Amelia Ruminates. But, we ruminate about it, and then we're coming back to it. Now, I suppose there's always value to reflection. There's always value to reflection, not suppose. But if you can, in the moment, as you're feeling what you're feeling, not the anger part, just say, no, I don't like people taking food off my plate before I've eaten. Don't do that again. So next time, wait for me to have the first bite. Right? Just setting that goal, but it's harder for some people to say that.
I think so, especially because in my eyes, taking from someone's plate, that's rude. So I feel like by calling them out, I'm also being rude. I don't want to be having
rude to rude.
calling people rude or like saying I don't like that, right? So I don't know. It's a weird thing because.
So for me, this analogy, I mean, much respect to people who, the food thing is a thing. For me, it's not a thing. If I don't know you and you're taking food from my plate, that's a different thing. But if you're part of my posse and you take food from my plate, my kids is, eat off my plate or whatever. So that is not an issue for me. But there are other things that is not, similar to that for me where, like, I don't like to be disrespected. I don't like people to talk to me in a particular tone. Like those ones, some of them catch you. They're sneaky. They catch you off guard. And then you go home that night. And for me, when I'm about to go to sleep, that's when things come back to me. And I'm thinking, I do not like how I felt. Right? So in my head, it's not something I'm going to make an issue of, but I'm going to watch it. Right? And if it happens again, I'm eventually going to have to do something about it. But the doing may not necessarily be a confrontation. But so I might talk to people and say, what do you think about this? I might get opinions, and then I might decide to just either withdraw, leave it alone, or if it's really critical to my self-esteem and feeling good about myself, I think I will address it.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing that I would love for people to get out of this conversation in general is that it doesn't matter what bothers your friend, right? It doesn't matter if she's cool with you taking off her plate or doesn't want you to have the first bite or whatever it is. Like if someone voices a concern, just know that regardless of whether or not this is something that would bother you, if you care about your friend, listening and responding to how they feel, even if it doesn't make sense to you, even if you don't get it, even if you're like, that's not a big deal. But I think one of the worst things that we can do to any person in our life, like not just a friend, but maybe a family member, a child, like anyone, is invalidate their feelings. And if someone's like voicing something and saying that it upsets them or it annoys them or just doesn't make them feel good, I think it's important to try and see if you can work through that and find some path forward. Like, because if it's not a big deal, then it's probably not a big deal for you not to do it.
But sometimes people do have quirky behaviors that I'm thinking of. I'm just going to humor Amelia in this one because this is what she needs. But goodness, in my head, you should hear the conversation in my head, that is not being voiced. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe she still thinks, this thing about food on her plate or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's probably good that people don't always know the conversations that are happening inside our heads.
Probably.
We wouldn't have many friendships.
I was going to say the same thing, but I didn't know if that would sound terrible. You're just so much more direct than I, and I love it.
No conversations would ever become public. Anyways, are we still talking about reciprocity?
Feel like this moved on.
But no, okay, we've moved on. But that's the ebb and flow of friendship.
Yeah, I
That's
think
right.
the only other thing that I know we had talked about it at one point during this episode, but in reciprocity, like there's also times where you might need something from a friend, but they're just unable to give it. How do you navigate those parts?
Oh, I have a good example for that. So you're asking, when you needed something and the friend wasn't able to give,
Mm-hmm.
what did you do? Well, so I had a situation where I had a really, really good friend, and my family at the time was going through a particular crisis. My husband was in the hospital. And this friend, like, I'd been there for her, do everything, where you think you're investing in the bank, so to speak, except you don't know you're putting money in the bank, or you don't think about it at the time. And I really expected this person to kind of drop everything, right? And come to my rescue. Like I was, my husband was at the point of death, and whew. And, even though I messaged and she messaged back, but there was no coming. There was no, I'm going to meet you at the hospital, and thinking, what? Could she not? And I held that for a while. Like, I can't believe of all the things I've gone out of my way and done for this person. How could they not be here for me during this difficult time? And now we're past the crisis. My husband is going to live and blah, blah, blah. But, I carried feelings for that for a long time. And then when I was able to step back, and writing this book helped me with some perspective on that. When I was able to step back and I'm going, but did you look at what was happening in your friend's life at that point? They were in no way able. And you poured into them because they needed the help. But you were going through a crisis when they were in the middle of their crisis. So there's no way they could have poured back into you. And in my head, I'm still judging them, right? I would have made a way. I would have found a way to do it. But just to say, one, the person couldn't have at the time. Secondly, it's not their thing. Like, some people just don't like hospitals. They don't like to be around sick people. My friend is one of those. And so I will never get what I want in that particular circumstance from this friend. Never, ever. And it's coming to terms with that. Like, are we still going to be friends just because they can't come through in this one thing? And it's the case we make in the book to say, on the overall balance, when you balance things out, are there enough reasons to say, yes, I continue to pour in this person, even if they will never be able to give me this particular piece? The scale kind of list more on the side where there's still more reasons to keep the friendship than to let it go. So that to me is an example where I had expectations. I wanted the person to pour it to me, and they just did not, or maybe they could not, or they didn't notice, or whatever. And it's not something I, to this day, would ever feel comfortable raising with the person. Never. Because I just figured it was something that was personal to me. Plus, it means I'm going to come across as being kind of needy. Not to be considered needy. What do you mean you wanted me to pour into you, and now 10 years later you're still carrying this torch of whatever? So, you don't want to come across to your friend as being that kind of needy person. At least that's not my personality. So I'm going to swallow that one and, keep trekking.
Yeah, but you never know. Sometimes you can be surprised, and 10 years later you can have a conversation you were meant to have and, get another perspective.
But I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for it. I'm like,
I wouldn't expect her to bring it up, considering you were the one that was hurt. But,
if the person has any clue that I was there catching feelings.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. But, sometimes life gives you gifts.
So we're going to pass this on to you guys, listeners, now. Can you think of an example of a time when you felt like you weren't getting 50-50 out of your friendship? Leave a comment.
Yes, please tell us. We are desperate to hear what you think because, as I said, I have many questions. This is also part of my life. I always have more questions than answers. Amelia has answers. She ruminates and she thinks about things deeply, and then she comes out with these profound things. I do not like her some days.
That is the end of episode 2.
You've been listening to the Girl Friendships Podcast with Yvonne and
Amelia, thanks for listening. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
Leave a comment, please, to let us know your thoughts.
And come back next time for another episode of Girl Friendships.